everybody, and welcome to another episode of Every Day's a Train Wreck. I'm your host, Marley Major, and I am so excited to bring to you a very longtime friend and a very, very, very smart friend, and one I know you guys are going to love for a very different reason than all of the other kind of pop culture ones we've had on here. And I don't think we're not going to talk about crystals. We're not going to talk about the full moon. We're not going to talk about Mercury in retrograde, but we're still going to have a lot of fun. And most importantly, and keep listening, because we're going to be talking about one of the things near and dear to my heart, which is tracking your time. So one of my favorite lawyers, Don Schweitzer, welcome to the program. And Don, before I butcher your bio, I want you to tell everybody what it is you do. And most importantly, like how you got to be the lawyer. Because the reason I hired you initially was when one of my friends said, he seems super chill. And because I was like, I need somebody with bite. I need somebody. And they're like, he can be an ass, but he's not going to start out that way. And I was like, well, why not? They're like, you'll see. But that's not his approach. So jump in and tell us what you do, your backstory, and prove to us that you really do have some bite. How's that?
Well, what I do is I deal with everybody's daily train wrecks. I love the name of your show, Marley, because that is what you and I have in common. So I'm a certified family law specialist. I work, my law practice is in Pasadena. I've been practicing law for over 30 years, and I've been doing family law now for, I think, about maybe 24 years. So I handle everything from divorces to child custody, spousal support, domestic violence cases. It's a real big one for me. And in fact, that's a big topic for everybody that's practicing family law these days. And we could talk about why that is, but it's the playing field these days.
Definitely want to cover that. So remind me.
How each case starts. I mean, most of the cases start with a domestic violence request, or a restraining order request. That's what I do. And I think that you had, maybe some follow-up questions for me as to how I got into this.
Yeah.
I got into this because, first of all, at law school, it was one of my favorite topics. There's something that's very sick about me.
That's why we're friends. That's the only reason we're friends, Don, because if you're as normal as you appear on the surface, it would never work.
There's some craziness inside me. I'm chill, but there's a craziness inside me. It's funny because people who practice family law have to have something in them that attracts them to these type of cases because they're very, very difficult. I've told you this before. You were my favorite client of all because when you came to me, you weren't looking for an animal. You were looking for somebody that would just kind of take care of business and get it done. Very rare, Marley. I would say that most of the people that come to me want to conduct their own case. They want to pursue things that aren't really, reasonable. You came to me and said, Don, I just want out of this thing. Let's just get it done and stuff. And most people think that I'm looking for the crazy clients. I'm not. Most family law attorneys really love the calm, type of client that wants fair results, that just wants to get it done, that is mature and behaves well. You were at the top of my list, believe it or not.
Just heads up, there's nobody going to believe it. They're going to be like, oh my God, that bloodthirsty witch.
I'm telling you, audiences right now, she was a pleasure working with. I mean, it was incredible. So anyways, that's kind of what I do.
Yeah. Okay. And what did you do before you became, like, you're in private practice?
Yeah. So I was a police officer for about 10 years. I was a police officer in the suburbs of Chicago. I came out to California. I was a police officer for the city of Santa Ana. I became a detective. I was on the SWAT team. I did all those macho things. But when I was in the courtroom, I just loved the action. I was with these deputy DAs, and I said, I want to do that. So I went to law school, and then I became a prosecutor where I prosecuted cases for about 8 years. And that really does tie me to what I think is my mission. And I don't want to be sappy here because I know this is a lighthearted show.
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, it's that's the whole point, though. You hit on something very important. On the surface, it's a lighthearted show, right? Every day's a train and ha ha ha. But it's also about how everything looks one way on the surface and how there's so much more. So that's what I'm kind of after, is like, what's the so much more with you?
For me, I've had a calling all my life. When I was a police officer, I felt like I was meant to be there. It was something that I really believed in the mission in. Became a prosecutor. I was protecting the public. But as a family law attorney, I feel like I'm protecting people and serving people that are going through the worst times in their lives. So I've had the good fortune of always knowing that I had a purpose in my life and, going every day towards that purpose. And that's what I do as a family law attorney. I'm dealing with people that are crazy, right? Because they're going through the worst times of their lives. And I don't do it to get a thank you because most of the time people don't thank us for our services, and stuff. But I know when I'm doing well and I'm performing well. And that's the benefit that I get from doing this work.
One question, since everybody who listens to this regularly knows I'm the total pop culture junkie. And I decided it's the one thing that just calms my ridiculous brainwaves down, is to just have it participate in total nonsense. So there are a ton of big trials going on right now that I'd love to get your opinion on. But first, when you say you're in the prosecutor's office, I've got to ask you, did you know Alan Jackson?
I do know him.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so you guys who are, I got feedback from another guest actually, and their episode hasn't aired yet, but they are from, I forget, like Wisconsin or something like that. And they said, yeah, they've been in LA forever. And they were like, God, I was listening to a bunch of these episodes and they were like, I thought I knew LA well, but they're like, you get into this fabric of this, like, I call it like the Pasadena, like the Real Housewives of Pasadena, or like the Pasadena Mafia or whatever. But we have some really interesting characters here. And one of them, Alan Jackson, was a former prosecutor who's now defending Karen Reed in that crazy high profile trial. Anyway, I just had to tie it back together to say.
Well, let me talk to you about how I know Alan Jackson. He and I our careers were almost parallel. We both served as military policemen, and he went to the DA's office in LA. I went to, civilian police work for a little bit and then became a DA in Orange County. I'm a little bit older than him. When I look at his career and especially how he handled that Spectre trial, I think he was the top. He was a fantastic prosecutor.
That's right. And I forgot about that. He was in charge. He prosecuted the Phil Spector murder, or the Alana Clarkson.
And that was one case where the LADA's office brought out the very best to take care of a high profile case. And I was so proud of him. And I thought that was a good decision. He, as you probably remember, ran for DA. He lost against Jackie Lacey, who was another great prosecutor. After he lost, our bar association, while I was the vice president of the association, we invited him to speak at Law Day. And he gave a presentation of the Spectre trial that just dropped everybody's jaw. I mean, it was incredible. He's such a gifted guy. That's why he's winning all the time. He's going across the country and he's taking on these impossible cases and he's winning because he knows, this is the real deal guy.
Yeah. And he one thing about him too is some of my best friends who are married, who I will not say who they are, but know the guy so well for a billion years and then say the same thing. That guy is the real deal, smart as a whip, hardworking, no baloney. So anyway, I cut you off. Keep going.
Yeah, he and I had lunch once, and there's a funny story behind that. But crazy thing, Marley, is I've got a case against him now.
What? Oh, wow. Oh, goodness. Okay.
Unnamed client, but I have a case against him right now. It's going to be fun.
Oh, I love it. Okay, well, you got to tell us. One of the interviews that I'm about to do is, I don't know if you heard this whole thing about Detroit Pistons and how the guy paid the witch to cast a spell or whatever. He bought the witch on Etsy for like $9 and then the Pistons won. And I'm like, oh, wow, who knew that's all it took is a $9 spell. So let me know if you need me to cast a spell on Alan Jackson right after this, we'll log onto my Etsy account and I'll handle it for you. Okay. All right. So keep going. So you had lunch with them and?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you about that lunch. I had to meet with him in order to get him to be part of our program. And he invited me to the California Club. Now, I'm a Pasadena guy. I don't go downtown very often. And so I thought he said the Jonathan Club.
For everybody who the Jonathan Club and the California Club are rivals, okay? In the sense, okay, so they're both from the 1800s. The walls of both places are covered in Hollis Huntington or whatever, Henry Honey, whatever his name was. Kellogg's, all of those walls. And so and I always get it wrong, but there's a joke that says the California Club people founded LA and the Jonathan Club people run it, or the opposite. But then there's like with our friends who happen to belong to the Jonathan Club, but with our friends who belong to the California Club, not very long ago, one of them made a joke and said, "Oh, it's your club. They play Yanni in the parking lot." Like, it's so stupid and ridiculous. But okay, so keep going. So you're waiting at the Jonathan Club.
Picture, the dark wooden walls and the plants, and I'm sitting in the 1800s, like you said, in this very exclusive club, and I'm going, I'm here waiting for Alan Jackson. Nobody recognized that he was coming or he was a member of the club, and so I called my office. I go, "Where is he?" And they go, "Well, let me call him." And as it turned out, it was a California club. So me being brand new to LA, kind of, I go running across the street to the California club, and I go, "Is Alan Jackson here?" They say, "Yeah, he's upstairs, at the such and such table." I go there, and there's his empty plate of food, and his drink, half drink. So he was long gone, and I was so embarrassed,
Oh, yeah, but he's a cool guy. I bet I'm sure he totally got it.
Well, you know what? He rescheduled it for me. We had a very nice lunch afterwards, and stuff. And, when he and I really clicked because we're both workaholics. We believe in merit, and we talked about, working for the government, how it's not really always the people that perform or, do well or work hard. It's kind of, a lot of politics and stuff. And he had a distaste for that as well as I did, so, we were on the same level in that regard, and stuff. But he's a great guy.
God, I wish that this unnamed client of yours, I wish that somehow that could be publicized. I would love to watch that boxing match. Let me tell you, that would be a good one. But what you mentioned something that caught my attention, which is, you guys are both workaholics. So I love to work. I mean, myself, Lord knows I squawk about it enough, but do you think you kind of have to be, to me, workaholism has like a bad definition because it just implies that it's just always too much and over the top and it's at the detriment of everything else. But to me, you can be a workaholic and just love, like if you're, I don't want to say, I'll probably get in so much trouble. Like an alcoholic, you love vodka. Okay. So workaholic, you love work. I don't necessarily think it has to be all bad, but do you think you've got to be a workaholic to do well in such a competitive field like you are in?
I think you have to be dedicated and committed. I don't think you have to be so crazy about your work that it's to the detriment of everything. In fact, I think the biggest challenge that people like you and me have, Marley, is planning, time management, and ensuring that we get a full life, and life isn't just work, and, I do lean towards the work part a little too much, and I'm always thinking about how I can make it, more in harmony. Bezos once said that it's not about balance; it's about harmony. Can you harmonize your work and the rest of your life? And that's the continuous challenge that people like you and I have. And I think both you and I are doing a pretty good job at it, actually. So yeah, you have to work. I look at it as competition. Am I working harder than the opposing people? I got a lot of competitive people, out there that I'm going up against, but at the same time, am I giving myself enough time to rest and enjoy family and friends? And I think I am.
Yeah. And I think the other component to that is not that I'm, again, advocating for workaholism, but I think that when we take a minute to enjoy your family or friends, or you go out and just whatever it is that's fun for you, is that I do think that's a lot of times when your ideas come, because I'm right now, for people who have been listening and know I'm working on these patents, and this patent the application is actually going in tomorrow. The point is that I have had this on my mind for 3.5 years, right? I've been like constantly, and there'll be parts with it where I get stuck and I talk to the lawyer and we go back and forth and we'll just get stuck and stuck and stuck. And then I will come back from a workout not thinking anything about it. Like I'm just kind of doing my to-do list or whatever it is. And I'll go in my garden, I'll check on something and putz around, and all of a sudden I'll be like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's the missing piece. So it does that harmony. Like I think of music too. I mean, you have different notes and different chords, and it's in the kind of discrepancy of it. I don't know. That sort of seems to make it work.
Yeah. You're really saying what I heard over and over again through self-help books and listening to successful people, that you have to walk away from it in order to be creative. And it's funny. I think we all have that same experience. I could be on vacation relaxing. All of a sudden I get the best idea that I've had in months.
My dad has always taught me something, and my dad is a big, huge person in my life for many reasons, but also especially for business. But one of the things he's definitely taught me is, he said, always approach something in business as if the other guy is smarter than you are. Always approach it as they're smarter. They know more. They're going to outwit you. And I was like, what? Like that. And he said, because if you go into it like that, you're much less likely to be default hubris, or you're much less likely to miss a detail that you think. But if you always go in thinking they've got an edge, you're so much better off. And that has really served me so many times. And the reason I'm bringing that up to you is because I'm sure your opposing counsel is, let's say, a lawyer you've never heard of, or not a big name or something. But then when you get a name like Alan Jackson, because he's got a reputation, do you all of a sudden sharpen your skills, or are you just kind of like, dude, I'm a pit bull no matter what?
So I've learned not to, for one thing, demonize my opponent. Give them a lot of respect. They're there to test you as to whether or not you're performing well, and stuff. And so I think that in the years that I've done this, I've honed it to the point where I approach it in a methodical way. I know that I've got to give it the amount of time. I've got to think strategically. I try not to freak out with respect to the case I'm handling or the people I'm going against. It's about whether I'm performing well, and stuff. And I know when I'm on it, and I know when I've missed the mark. I'm reading a book right now that you might have read already. It's called Inner Excellence by James Murphy. All the keys are right there. With regard to not thinking about the result, not thinking about things you can't control. I can't control the beast I'm going to be going up against. But one thing I can do is really concentrate on, do I know the case well enough? Am I applying all my skills, and giving myself enough time to do it?
Yeah, that's a key thing, is giving yourself the time to do it. And I want to split the hair a little bit about that, because it reminds me of, like, my daughter just finished her junior year, and last weekend just finished her last final and all that stuff, right? And I think there's a certain amount of that's time, like time spent in front of the material, time spent in front of her, whatever, AP Spanish studies, or time you're spending reviewing all the details of the case. But then I also think there's a component, which I am not always great at, which is the time to just not have your time be rushed, right? So it's like, let's say she going to put in 8 hours, I don't know, to study for her AP Spanish final. But it's a different 8 hours if you approach it 2 hours a day, kind of over a 7-day period, versus if you do it the day before and say, I need to log 8 hours. Now, it's still 8 hours, but it's a different 8 hours, right? And something that I found kind of along the lines of almost compounding interest is that if I do the 2-hour chunk and then let it sit, it's like all these little kind of particles of taking a shower and washing the dishes and something where you're not thinking about it. You get these little extra layers of benefits, right? So then when you go back to the next 2 hours, it's just so much more significant than trying to jam it all in. And I'm not trying to imply that, you can't take a case and crush it if you took over somebody's case and try it in a week or something. But do you agree with that, or what's your take?
Yeah, I do agree. I think that if you're going to perform to the best you can, giving yourself enough time and managing your time is key. There's an old expression, and I know I'm full of these old expressions today. Sorry.
No, I'm full of them too. I'm feeling very old. So as I say, I got my Botox bill from a week and a half ago, and I thought, Lord have mercy, if that isn't how old can you feel?
But it's, manage your time, not your work. Time is limited, work is indefinite, and so you have to learn to prioritize and plan. And it's always, the challenge that we all have, because especially in this day and age, there's just so much information coming at us. There's so many things that you can do that you want to do in a given day, but it's limited time. So for me, like the best trials that I've ever done, I've gotten a real early start on looking at the exhibits, understanding the case, and then building it incrementally. Of course, at the end, there always is kind of like this rush to get it done and stuff, and really, put in the time at the end. But to do it good is exactly like you said, is starting early.
Yeah. And I think that's, say it's equal parts, at least to me, of kind of giving time for little ideas to build on top of each other. But then I think there's also this internal like cortisol component or something where your brain isn't studying the material and thinking, oh my gosh, but I've got to get it done by, you're relaxed. And, Stephen Covey has a great thing where he says, for every minute you plan, you save 4 minutes. And sometimes that's really hard to think like, I'm going to sit down and like go over my to-do list and prioritize it and spend that time when you're like, but I've got to just start getting stuff done. But every time I do that, when I just jump in and I don't think like, what is the priority? Somehow I always get it wrong. Now, what as lawyers, like I know you guys have whatever software that you use for all kinds of things, but what do you use for your own like project management software? Like if you, Dawn, are trying to kind of block out your time and stuff, that always fascinates me.
Yeah. So what's really important for me is besides the software that we use, we use a good one. Well, the one I'm using, it's called Caret, Caret. There's another one that's out there that people use. There's some primary ones that people are using these days. They surfaced, it seemed like right around when COVID was around. People were working from home and stuff, but we are completely online and it's a great program. Besides using the program, which is fantastic, what I do is I block out time on my calendar so that people know don't schedule anything for Don during this time period. And I specifically write preparation for X, Y, and Z, and stuff. And then I look at my hearings ahead of time and I try to sit and plan. I think that's a great idea, Marley. But what's important is that you got to stick to it. And like everything else, you have to have a routine. So for me, like Saturday mornings when most people are sleeping and stuff, I'm up looking at my calendar and I'm figuring out what am I going to be doing over the next month or so. And then I plan that out. And that way I could stay on top of these cases.
That's really important because in a lot of ways, being a lawyer is like being an event planner. I mean, everybody's going to laugh at that, but here's why: you've got multiple projects at all different stages, right? I mean, you might be going to trial with something, on Tuesday, you're planning Saturday morning. You might be going to trial Tuesday morning. But then you also might have a case that's 3 months out, but it isn't like, oh, I'll just start kind of in August. And then if that client who's calling you about something in August is stressed out and freaked out, well, you better believe it's going to feel like an emergency to you. I mean, even though you're like, wait a second, that's so far off. But to them, and I think that's another similar thing with event planning is that in both of our businesses, ironically, there's a huge component of emotion and there's a huge component of like fear, and you almost become not just a lawyer, not just the event planner, but almost like the therapist, right? Because I mean, at least when even I can think of a client I referred to you, and I was thinking kind of later, I was like, so much of it at the end of the day is really just reassuring the person that you know what you're doing, you've got the expertise to do it, and you're going to handle it so they don't have to worry about it. It's so much mental management.
Well, that's where our two careers are exactly the same as you're taking stress away from people, taking it away from them. I know for me, like, if I was planning a big party or something like that, having you working for me, then I could just do everything else I want to do and not worry about that. And that's why people hire lawyers, in a lot of ways.
Okay. So right now, depending on when people listen to this, but right now this Karen Reed trial is going on. We talked about Alan Jackson. Right now, this Diddy trial is going on. You've got Mark Garagos with that. He's also got the Menendez brothers things going. So in general, not necessarily about those specific cases, but how do you think big, high profile cases in the media, how do you think all this media and social media and influencers, and I've been hearing all these things, about these online sleuths who have their whole situation, they get involved and then the police get furious because they're interfering, et cetera. How do you think all that stuff affects law these days and decisions?
Well, I think some of the publicized stuff, like the Johnny Depp trial that we saw 2 years ago, that really was a magnifying case that the public got to see what happens between two parties that are going through a nasty breakup. And there's a lot of venom on both sides and all the games that people play on both sides. On one hand, we've got what appears to be somebody fabricating evidence. And the other side, you've got somebody that's hired the big lawyer and they're going for blood and the juggler. When I mean, that's exactly what we see in a lot of the cases we have. So these high profile cases educate people. Unfortunately, I think sometimes though, what it does is it gives people the idea that that's how you're supposed to behave. If you're going through a family law case, you want the optimal results, even if your lawyer's telling you that it's not possible.
Yeah, no, I get it. And do you think like with that Johnny Depp case and Amber Heard, because I mean, we can all know what they would say, maybe, oh, we didn't want this to be this public, or we didn't. But do you think there is a certain element of like, I'm going to get you by exposing this, the fact that you smoke pot before breakfast or something?
Yeah, I think it's warfare. I mean, when people are breaking up or have broke up in a relationship and there's hard feelings, they act at the very worst. And that's why you have, unfortunately, violence, in America, a lot of murders and stuff, because people are so hateful. Marley, I always tell people the most dangerous time in a breakup is right at the beginning. I mean, and then what happens, interestingly, is there's a evolution of how people behave during a divorce. And there's, things that I could spot as patterns. But at the end of the case, right when they're about to settle, believe it or not, it flares up again. You just see one last flare up, and fortunately, the people that know how to take care of themselves and they listen to the advice of others, they go and seek therapists and try to rebuild their lives, they become normal human beings again, after a couple of years.
Yeah, if they were quasi-normal to start with. Well, to me, that sounds like an event planning act. In our office, we call it the Oreo cookie approach. It's like there's all this work at the beginning, and then the middle is kind of like, getting bids and they're dealing with other people, let's say in my office. And then at the end, it's all intense. It's the week to 10 days before the event. The client hates you. They think you're an idiot. Like, and I even now start the process with big jobs. Like, let me just tell you how this is going to go. 7 to 10 days before, you are going to say why, blah, 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 because it's going to feel like it's just, the emotion is heightened. And as soon as the emotion is heightened, everybody just starts seeing like, am I doing the right thing? Are you doing the right thing? Or did I pick the right lawyer? And it's just like, okay, hang on. Let's see it through and then lower the temperature.
Yeah, that's exactly what I feel that I have to do. I have to be real with people as well. Sometimes, at least when I first started doing family law, I was a real pleaser. So I had a hard time telling people, look, your ideas aren't really making sense, and this is what we've got to do. But now I think I've learned that most people respect you for that, and it's those are the type of clients that you want, the ones that will actually listen to you.
Yeah. Now, you brought up another great point about this domestic violence component. And I remember when I was referring you to somebody and that came up and you were like, it made it seem like it is so easy for somebody to just make a domestic violence claim. And when I really started thinking about it, I thought, wait a second, it is. And it has huge ramifications, right? So can you talk a little bit about that, at least in California, like what the tactic is or what you have to be really careful of in a breakup?
Marley, let me first let your audience know that as a former police officer, I responded to hundreds of domestic violence cases, and I've seen the worst. As a prosecutor, I specialized in prosecuting domestic violence cases. I was given some special training because of that. And then as a family law attorney, I've represented both the accused and, the victims. So I consider myself really well-rounded, and I could see this thing on both sides of the case. The evolution of domestic violence in family court is something that we could talk about all day long, but right now in time, it has become the playing field. When somebody comes through your door, one of the first questions you have to ask is there any evidence of domestic violence? Have the police ever been called out to your house? How was the relationship? Was it controlling? So right now it's the starting point, because if you win in a domestic violence case, whether it's getting a restraining order or over custody, big things are going to happen. And unfortunately, what that's caused is a lot of people to not tell the truth, and so, it requires some trial skills going into these cases, understanding evidence and being mindful of the fact that there are people that fabricate, and getting to it. And it's a whole production. A case that involves domestic violence is going to take several days. It's very expensive. And it's just how family law cases are going, not only in California, but throughout the nation.
So okay, let's say a client comes to you and says, yes, gosh, I don't know. We had a squabble a few years ago, and yeah, the neighbors called the cops, and gosh, I didn't even think of it as no big deal. They came, and that was the end of it. In your mind, is that the end of it, or are you going to dig into that?
Well, if I'm representing the person that feels like there was abuse, I'm going to be very real and say, look, even though it's just by preponderance of the evidence, you don't sound like you have enough yet. Let's talk further. Let's go further. A lot of people don't even realize how easy it is to get a restraining order under certain circumstances, and they kind of blow off past events. So I try to get a very thorough interview with them. But if I don't think it's there, I would be very real with them and go, look, don't waste your time. I mean, you could spend an enormous amount of money, and it's just not worth it for you. You got other issues to deal with. If it's the accused, then I'm like, okay, let's see if we could develop this case by seeing if we can engage in discovery, taking a deposition, calling the police department that responded, getting body cam evidence, and all those things that you need to disprove. I had a case where a lady was accusing my client of domestic violence. Little did she know that when the police arrived, they had body cameras on, and she was speaking to her mother in Chinese, and they were talking about fabricating the story. Right. And the police didn't know because they didn't speak that language. But when they came to me, one of my attorneys who does speak Chinese listened to it, and we just, we nailed it right there and stuff.
Yeah. Merry Christmas. That's awesome. So in that case, let's say that, the guy says, oh yeah, the neighbor called the cops and nothing, would you guys dig in and talk to the neighbor and say, hey, listen, was this really no big deal? Or
yeah, if the neighbor was a precipient witness, I definitely would interview that person and possibly even subpoena them into court.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, why do people, talking about cases that are going right now, why do people get so freaked out when they're subpoenaed? I mean, there's no question it's not going to be a fun thing, no question. But there's all this, back to my pop culture stuff where Taylor Swift is not speaking to Blake Lively because she got subpoenaed. Well, how much of that is in Blake Lively's hands, right? I mean, isn't it Blake Lively and Jason Baldoni, whatever his name is? If she tells her lawyer what's going on, doesn't the lawyer kind of say, listen, we've got to subpoena these people?
Yeah. So I think, your question is why do people resist subpoenas, when they get it? And, who are notorious for that are doctors. Doctors, they hate taking time out of their work to come to court, and there's always this clash. But most of the people that don't want to go to court are fearful of speaking in public. Going to court they may not have ever stepped foot in a courtroom, and the thought of going in there and taking the stand and testifying is terrifying to people. Unlike people like you who love to speak.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd love to just I'd be like, oh yeah, let me tell you exactly what happened that night with that guy. I was eating pizza. I was looking out the window. I remember because I thought I needed a pedicure. Yeah, exactly. I'd be like, they'd be like, thank you, ma'am, off the stand. So that, I never thought of that. Right. Because that's one of the biggest top fears is public speaking.
Yeah. I have to prepare my witnesses, particularly my clients. I'm like, look, when you go in there, your heart's going to be pounding. You're going to be nervous. And guess what? It's normal. I said, it's kind of as much fun as going to the dentist office knowing you're going to get drilled on, right? You're just waiting for that moment and stuff. But, if you prepare your witnesses, which we do, we get them to really formulate a game plan of how they're going to feel good about it. And with the proper preparation, 99% of the time, the witnesses walk out of there feeling good about, what happened.
Going back to my other sort of question that was buried in there, let's say Blake Lively goes to her lawyer and says, blah, 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 blah. I mean, isn't it a little bit out of her hands who gets subpoenaed? Like if the lawyer says, listen, we got to subpoena Taylor Swift because she's in your text messages, and is that kind of out of her hands? Or could she say to you, I don't want her subpoenaed. I don't want her bothered.
So that's kind of a fine line between what the client has control over versus what the attorney has control over. The law states that attorneys have the right to make strategy decisions. So, for example, if I'm in court and I'm cross-examining somebody, my client can't sue me for malpractice for, asking a question that they don't like, and stuff, or, that they don't get to take over the driver's wheel in that regard. But when we're talking about discovery, like issuing subpoenas and things of that nature, a lot of times the client can't afford it, unfortunately. So we tell clients like, look, this is how we could really make your case strong. And just as a backup, I want that person on subpoena. Well, Don, I don't have that money, and I'm kind of being tapped out. So we have to be mindful of that.
So can you make a prediction, or am I pushing it? Can you make a prediction about what's going to happen with Diddy?
Well, I'm not watching the trial, but I am watching the commentary on it. And I'm very familiar with the RICO statute. So in California, we actually have a state RICO statute. It's called the STEP Act. And as a gang prosecutor, I prosecuted the very first one that became an appellate court decision published. And so I'm very familiar with how easy it is to get people in on the RICO. I wrote a paper on it too when I was in law school.
To get them convicted or whatever on a RICO in California.
Yeah, so the biggest charges that he's really facing is the RICO thing, that he's got a criminal enterprise and that he was committing crime, for the benefit, of the enterprise. That's what they're going at.
Pause, meaning he was doing these freak offs or whatever, and that was kind of the enterprise?
I think they show that, he has people working for him, which is the organization. It's a criminal organization where he does what he wants. I guess he went up to another actor's house while he wasn't there and burglarized it and then, vandalized his property. And he went there to, with a gun, and he brought somebody with him, and then he's had his staff members help him bring prostitutes, across state lines and things of that nature. So theory is that it's a criminal enterprise. Now, whether the jury is going to see it that way, I don't know, but it was pretty inflammatory evidence. You always, as a prosecutor, you always want to start your case off with a punch to the face, right? Something that's shocking. You couldn't start that case any better than starting with that scene where he's beating that poor woman by the elevator and then physically dragging her back to the freak off. That's damn good evidence to start off with. But you and I have seen cases through the years, a la O.J. Simpson and other cases, where I've learned never to predict because it's like I'm always wrong.
I know. It's amazing, right? I mean, now that's a really interesting thing. I keep forgetting about the whole RICO thing as much as I love these, digging into these trials. But I think so many people think, because they just keep hearing this Cassie Ventura. And let's face it, she's 9 months pregnant now. She gives birth, the whole thing. Everybody, or a lot of people are thinking, he's getting prosecuted on a domestic violence case against her or whatever.
Which is not. They didn't even charge that. It's really about the overall conduct that he's been engaged in. And he's offended a lot of people. It sounds like his staff has testified against him.
Oh yeah, a lot of them. So is that why they've got so many of the staff people? Because they've got assistant from back then. All these assistants. So that makes sense. They're doing this as it's a criminal enterprise. There were employees involved in setting up this stuff.
Right. That's pretty strong evidence of an organization that's, serving a purpose of crime, and stuff. You think about the mafia, the mafia in New York, the traditional crime boss has legitimate business and illegitimate business. A lot of them might have plumbing companies, but they're also engaged in the, racketeer stuff. So, the proper way to analyze it is not that, this guy didn't have some real purpose, in the entertainment industry, but what else was he doing? I think that, for me, the challenge always is with celebrities, people becoming, infatuated, and the jurors sometimes go a little off, and stuff. We've seen that a lot here in LA where you see the majority of those type of cases.
And I've seen so many times where attorneys will say, hey, listen, XYZ might have been a jerk. That doesn't mean he was a murderer, a this, or, he might have done this, but that doesn't mean that you convict him on these other things. It's crazy. Well, how much time actually do you spend? I'm going to ask you in 3 ways: in the courtroom versus on the phone or email or whatever, dealing with other attorneys versus kind of all of your research and preparation. How many of these cases actually get to a courtroom before settling?
So a fact that many people don't know is that family law attorneys are in court probably more than any other type of attorney. Yeah, even I was a prosecutor and I was in court a real lot. But we're putting on hearings sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a week, sometimes twice a day, one in, Pasadena court, the other one downtown LA. Family law attorneys are really in court a lot. Now, it doesn't mean that they're exceptional at evidentiary hearings, which they're usually not, but we're in court a real lot. So, if you were to look at like my time cards and everything, the majority of my time is actually spent in court, as far as that. Now, I do spend a lot of time on the phone and, drafting and things of that nature, but court time is depositions, voluntary settlement conferences, mediation. I mean, we're doing a lot, that's just hands-on like that.
One of the things in my first book is kind of my secret sauce, but are you making any money? Which is what my dad would always ask me with all, it's like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And he's like, yeah, great. But are you making any money? And at the end of the day, when I came up with a solution to my own problems, a big part of it was tracking your time. And maybe at the time I was writing the book, I mean, I still feel like we have a lot of lawyers for different things, but I was very aware. And I think a lot of people are kind of the joke of like, if you pick up the phone, you're going to get a bill. Like, when in law school do you guys learn about tracking your time? Or is it from like minute one?
Law school doesn't say anything about tracking your time.
No way. So it's the firm then that says.
Yeah, well, it's the state bar is what happens. So think of it this way. When you're in law school, they talk about the ethics of billing and things of that nature, but there's no training on how to run a law practice, how to be profitable as a lawyer, how to, be able to pay the rent. There's absolutely none of that. And there needs to be, because people get out in the real world and they got a license and they flounder.
Interesting. That's the whole financial literacy component, because in fact, I was just having a conversation last week about with somebody who we're going to do this whole consulting thing just with physicians, because physicians, it's the same thing. They're spending, obviously, thank God, so much time learning how to cure the disease or whatever it is. And then, but they've got to run this practice. And they're like, wait, what? Huh? Like, I have no idea how to navigate this. Okay, so keep going.
Yeah, there's fantastic lawyers that don't make a dime. It's the thing that people don't know. So as far as billing is concerned, the state bar states that, like in family court cases, you either do a flat fee, which is a loser because you can never predict how much time a case is going to go, or you're going to have to bill according to what the state bar says, which is 1/10 of an hour for 0.5, 0.10, 0.20. You have to put that in your billing statements.
I didn't know that. I love that. So that's a state bar thing, is you are either a flat fee or... And would a percentage be also considered a flat fee? Like, I mean, in that category, or no, with a percent?
That's contingency. Yeah. There's no real contingencies in family court unless you're chasing after somebody's arrears, trying to collect some child support. I've never done that. But with regard to how do you make it work, is you have to set up goals. You have to keep on track of it. You got to bill as you're working, and stuff. And then, you have to collect on that as well. So it's billing and collecting and stuff. And so I think that being a good timekeeper is essential, and as I manage a lot of attorneys. We have specific training, in-house training on how to do that.
Oh, really? How much training is it on tracking your time?
In-person, like in-house seminar on it, where we had 2 days of it. And then we have videotaped it. So when new people come into the office, we show them how to do it. Yeah.
2 days? Like, and it was about time tracking?
It was about a total of 4 hours. So 2 and 2 is probably what it was. Yeah.
Okay. You know what I'm going to bug you for after is, can I sit in on that if I sign an NDA? I mean, I would literally love that, because 4 hours on time tracking, first of all, that is like such a huge aha moment to me, because it's like, whoa, how hard could it be? But the fact that there's that much emphasis, because it is so, so important. So what is the best practice? Like, are lawyers supposed to sit there with their iPhone and the call comes in and you hit the stopwatch and then the call ends? Or how do you do it? Or how do most of them do it? Do they do it at the end of the day? Do they do it before lunch? Like, how do you guesstimate?
Marley, attorneys do it in all different ways, but the best way to do that is be prompt in your billing, of the time. So, what we try to do is tell people, look, there's a lot of different ways to look. Your phone, like your cell phone actually tracks your time, right? So if you're using your cell phone, it's an easy way of seeing it. Put it immediately into the computer. My office phone does it. We got the billing programs here. So yeah, you're always looking at the clock and you're tracking it, like that.
So is it true? They're calling to check in on their case and, hey, Don, how are you? How are the kids? How was your holiday? Blah, 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 blah. And then they get into it. If it's 5 minutes of baloney and then 5 minutes of, oh yeah, did you send this in, or what do I need to do? The whole 10 minutes is billed, right?
It generally is. I tell people that, look, I'm not your therapist.
This is where the teeth come out. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
I bill at $700 an hour. Okay. You could find a therapist that's a lot cheaper and she knows what she's doing than having me talk. Listen, but I'll listen. We've got some clients, Marley, they know that they're paying me for it. And you ever talk to somebody that doesn't breathe, that they're just talking, you can't get a word edgewise. So we get some of those people, and we intermittently remind them, hey, look, this has been going on for 15 minutes. I'd like to talk, and they do that, and stuff. And so I'm not going to waste my time giving that time away for free, and stuff. I mean, because that's the only way that we can make a living is our time.
I love that. All right. Well, this has been fascinating. I mean, we have covered so many different topics, right down to how to track your time, which I'm gonna take the Don Schweitzer time tracking method on behalf of anybody I work with in the future, just because that would be fascinating. But Don, anything else? Any other parting shots you want to give us or advice? Anything interesting? But also tell us where to find you.
Well, you can find me on the internet. Just Google Donald Schweitzer, or Schweitzer Law Partners. You'll find us. We've got a pretty good website that explains who we are. One thing I did want to say coming into this, I thought you'd be interested in asking me whether or not I've represented celebrities. I'm in Los Angeles. Just about every family law attorney has a brush with a celebrity or two during their careers. I've had my fill. I can tell you right now that number one, celebrities don't make a practice.
Why do you say that?
Well, let me ask you this: they're big cases. You remember the Rodney King case? Can you name any of the attorneys that were representing the four officers?
I can, because one of them was my friend.
How about the others?
No, other than the one guy, no.
Can you name any of the prosecutors on the O.J. Simpson case?
Yes, of course. Darden, Marsha Clark.
Well, how about the other ones? I mean,
of course not. No, I mean, listen, you're talking to the wrong person, right? Because I'm a junkie about it. But okay, yeah.
That's true. So in my experience in representing a couple of, celebrities, number one is they haven't done a darn thing for my marketing, right? And that's what people jump in. Hey, I'll let you do my case for free because it's going to be great for your marketing. Well, no, if that doesn't work that way. The other thing is that most of the celebrities that I've dealt with got big problems. And a lot of it has to do with substance abuse or not understanding that the law applies to them and stuff. So, after I've been practicing now for, as long as I have, if a celebrity comes my way, they're just another client.
I'm very glad because I forgot that I wanted to bring that up because that's, for us, we had to have that as a differential advantage. Like people, I was an event planner for many years and nobody knew it. So then you get a celebrity client and all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, it's as if you just like popped up on Groundhog's Day or something. But it is a strategy. And one question I have is, do some of these lawyers like who have these high profile cases, like I'm not going to ask you to be specific, but like, we see Gloria Allred, we see some of these lawyers who it's like, as soon as something is in the news, they are the lawyer for it. Like, does the state bar let lawyers do things like that for free, or how does that work?
The state bar is not as good as we thought that they were, right? In light of some of the recent stuff that's gone on here with the Girardi case,
that's another one freaking A.
They've had a blind eye to a lot of stuff that's going on out there. I would say this is that, despite what I just said, that have made careers off of celebrity cases, but it's a very small, you've got, the Gloria Allreds, so the people that are out there that we all know, the household names, Johnny Cochran's, and all that stuff. But most attorneys have had like a big case and stuff, and you're not remembered for that case. You're really remembered for your body of work through a period of time.
If a lawyer wanted to take on something that was high profile just so that they can be on CNN or Fox or whatever every night, they could do it.
Yeah, the state bar doesn't have a problem with that. Now, there's ethical issues that I always deal with when you're mentioning your client's case in public, what should happen. And a lot of times, strategically, it doesn't make sense. I don't know if you know, but I was a talking head for many years on shows like the Nancy Grace Show, and Bill O'Reilly and things like that, and when some of those cases came out and I was going head to head with some of these defense attorneys that were out there, they were talking about the innocence of their client, I challenge them. It's like, okay, well, why isn't your client looking for,
Exactly. Like, yeah, hello, where is Scott Peterson looking for Lacey when he's fishing? Yeah, got it. I love it. Well, Don, this has been amazing. And then you made me think of so many other things to ask you and have you back on, which I would love to do when you can spare a moment.
You got to come on my podcast too. You worked been a long time. You came on when I started the podcast. We got to get you back on mine as well.
Happy to do shameless plugs. Yeah. So, Don, I can't thank you enough. So you guys, Don Schweitzer, and you can Google him, find out all about, of course, please subscribe to Every Day's a Train Wreck. Leave 5 stars if you're so inclined and a comment. And if you are not following me on Instagram, this is kind of a businessy one. So let's say go to @theprofitgoddess. And I look forward to seeing you guys all next week. So Don, thank you for your time. This was amazing.